Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at something a little bit different. This is actually a request from someone in the comments on one of last year's AE Modular videos, really asking if we can do a deep dive into how the actual patching sounds, works, the ins and out of how it all comes together to form my live set. And now feels like a good time to do this because the rig behind me has actually been downsized slightly. We've actually made it slightly smaller for playing at Cable Festival down in Stoke at the end of this month. Might even be past by the time this video comes out, who knows. And the rig has gone from being, well, let me show you, a rack this size, which I'm currently rebuilding as a studio rack. It's gone from being a rack that size, well, that rack, to a single 20 rack. You don't need all of the transition patches and things of that nature. We really just need the core sounds for the 7 songs we're playing at the festival. It's a half-hour set. Don't really have time for kind of going off script and doing any improvised stuff. It's really just got to stick to what's been rehearsed, get it as tight as possible so the transitions are quick, and really represent our music, what I've written, as best as I can in that half hour. Because of that, we've taken away a lot of the stuff that might have made it look quite confusing and dialed it to just the essential stuff for the 7 songs we're playing. And it's really just 3 main outputs just now. A drum output, a percussion and wave sound output, and an arpeggiator, sequenced melodics output. The combination of those 3 get fed into my Live Track 12 mixing desk, and this is done via the DBX266XL compressor gate rack mount processors. And these are great. These are actually my favourite gate so far. As noise gates go, some of them let a little bit too much through, some colour your sound and degrade your layers too much. These are my favourite ones by far. These ones are really versatile, can be dialed in quite well. They're not new ones, I bought these used. I don't actually know if they're still available new. And obviously you've got to make sure you're buying one that's in good condition if it is a used one. But I've had great success with these so far. The compressor is really hyped and over the top as well. So for drums in a live setting, it's really aggressive, really punchy. Add in from there any EQ and whatnot that I do in the Live Track 12, some effects in there as well, like the reverb. And the problem is that the examples I'll show today, they're going to be taken from the multi-track recording on the Live Track 12, because it doesn't just record the stereo output, it records the multi-track. The stereo output has all of the compression, effects, EQ that you can do in the live track. All of that is printed to the master, but you don't have any of that on the multi-tracks. The multi-tracks are raw. So in the examples you'll hear today, I've taken the multi-tracks, put them in Ableton, and I've tried to approximately get the sound I was using in the live track after the processing. It still has the DBX before it, because that was before the live track. All of them were recorded through the DBX into the live track. So you'll still hear the gates and the compressor, but everything else is being done in Ableton to kind of represent just what the live track is doing before it hits front of house. Because I feel like if I'd just left the raw multi-tracks, it might have lacked a bit of that punch that it really does have through the live track. So, like I say, processed in Ableton, but really just to match what the mixer would be doing. Anyway, we'll get into the patching now. We'll cut to the notepad and I'll sketch out what's actually going on inside this rack. Okay, so the AE Modular is actually responsible for 3 things in my live set, in the rack we're talking about today, not including my bass effects. The first thing is the arpeggiated sequences, which varies from song to song. Some of them are more of an arpeggiated pattern. In some songs, It's doing melodic lines, things like that, counter melodies, things that accompany what Andy's playing on keyboards. So that's one part, and that's on its own output. The next output is coming from the mix of the drums. So that's kick, snare, and hats. And in longer sets where we've got additional songs, it also has the cymbals. We don't actually have cymbals in any of the songs we're playing in this set for Stoke. It's really just hi-hats. So it's a mix of those. It's one thing that might change a little bit later down the line. We'll come back to that later in the video. And then the third thing is percussion. And included in that is the wave sound. Yeah, that wave sound is actually a noise generator. So we'll put that as noise. And that's the three main outputs coming from that AE Modular rack. But how do we get the MIDI sequencing into the modular? Well, what we do is we take the poly-end tracker and we take the MIDI output of that. So let's put that there, MIDI out. And that MIDI output goes into the MB1 from Wonkystuff. So it goes into the MB1 module. Then we take our MIDI channels out of that. So we've got multiple MIDI channels we can take out. So it's MIDI 1 to 16 available. Now I'm using the MB1 in this rack, but this could also be the MD Heart from Tangible Waves. It's just that my MD Heart has only just arrived actually on the week I'm filming this. So at this moment in time, it's still an MB1. It could be both. In fact, the MIDI Heart's going to go in my other rack that I'm building. So it's still going to be the MB1. So like I say, could be the MD Heart or the MB1 for this module here. And that takes that one MIDI input on TRS, on a TRS cable even, from the poly-end tracker and turns it into 16 MIDI channels within the AE Modular rack. So we've got one output going to an MTR8 for all the drums and one output going to an MCO for the arpeggiator sequences. For me, that's MIDI channel 10 and MIDI channel 2. So I'm actually only using two outputs really just now for this. I've got a lot more I can do with this, let's be honest. And I will actually be exploring it further in the studio rack. The live rig is really just the essentials to get us through the show. In particular, the stream down rig just now is to get us through the 30-minute Cable Festival set with as little hassle and complexity as possible. It's portable, it fits into my case very well. That's what we're going for with this. But there's a lot more. Well, there's 14 other MIDI channels I could be using on this and will be in the studio rack. So let's look at the arpeggiator sequence layer. So this has the MB1 module, which sends the MIDI into an MCO, which is the MIDI controlled oscillator from Wonkystuff. I take the audio out of that, which goes into the modulator from Tangible Waves. So that's the A output. And then I take the gate output, which takes my gate signals, and I also feed that in to trigger the envelope generator. So audio, really, it goes the audio into the VCA within this modulator. The gate goes to the envelope generator, which feeds into the VCA, and then we get our output. That is it. That's all I'm doing with that modulator. And then from there, it goes into the wasp filter, and then currently is outputting at a stomp IO, so I can add effects pedals after it. And then use the send as the output. Like that. Cutting that very close to the edge of my screen actually, let's just move that up a little bit. So that's what I'm using for that arpeggiator sequence line. So it goes the tracker, which I forgot to add here, sends MIDI into the MB1. That MIDI goes to the MCO, where I take audio into the modulator, into the wasp filter, then the stomp IO, and then I use that stomp IO as an output, really into more pedals, and then on the output. We'll explain that later because that might change a little bit. But for now, that's what's happening. And then the gate output from the MCO goes into the modulator through the envelope generator, which triggers the VCA and basically sends the signal high on the output of the modulator to the wasp. So I'm really just using the audio and the gate functions from that MCO module. So that's how this works. So let's just cut back to the section from Echoes from the Cutting Room Floor and listen to this arpeggiator sequence on its own. So next up, we're going to look at the drums. So the kick, the snare, and the hi-hats. And what's happening here is we're taking that MB1 again, which has got MIDI going into it from the tracker, and then that's hitting the MTR8, which we've spoke about in another couple of videos. In fact, we'll be speaking about it again in my bass rack video, which is coming probably the week after this, if not a couple of weeks after. So just to summarise what this module does though, it takes the MIDI information from the MB1, it takes MIDI note information. So as standard, it goes from C5 and sends 8 sequential triggers. So it'd be C5, C#5, D5, D#5, so on. You can reprogram that to any MIDI notes you want though. So you just set the bass one and then it fills in the rest onwards chromatically. So this MB1 sends MIDI note information into this. And then this takes that MIDI note information and gives you 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gate outputs. So those 8 outputs are gate pulses. They are high for as long as that MIDI note lasts. We're going to look at that deeper in the bass rack one because that's useful for something else. But for drums, when I send a MIDI note with a pulse from the poly-end tracker, it assigns it to one of these outputs. So these 8 outputs are numbered from 0 to 7. Like that. And for me, these have all been assigned to trigger a different drum sound. So the first one is the BD55, which is the kick. Second one is the SD110, which is the snare. These are both Wonkystuff modules. The next two are from the Wonkystuff HH110, which you could probably guess what that is. That's our hi-hats. And that's our closed hats and our open hats. Number 4 is the cowbell, again from Wonkystuff, the CB808. And then number 5 is actually the noise module from Tangible Waves for the wave sound on the song Waves. We're actually triggering the envelope for it, which allows this noise to pass through the VCA. Then we've got the RS55, which looks a little bit like R555, but that is RS55. And that's the rim shot. Again, Tangible Waves. Again, Wonkystuff. And then lastly, we've got the got the CY110, which is the cymbal module. again from Wonkystuff. So that's how mine's is assigned. And that's starting 0 here and 7 here. So it goes from 0 to 7 that way. So each one of these is actually being triggered at some point in the set. We'll actually use all of these except from the cymbal in this short set. But only certain ones are actually on this output here. We've got the kick drum, the snare, and the hi-hat. So those 4 triggers there. So these 4 triggers, we'll just condense this so it's a bit easier. We've got kick, snare, and then the 2 hi-hat options. We'll put CL, we'll put open for that. Then what we do after this is we run the kick into an EQ, which is the 2-tone. So that's one half of it, and then the snare goes to the other half of it. So we've got both of those running through a bass and treble control basically. And they've got their own one so they can be dialed in each to their own settings. Then the combined outputs of these 4 sounds, again the hi-hat's really just one output, but it's easier to show that it's 4 separate triggers. They go into a mixer. And then that mixer goes to Stomp IO, and then that goes out. Use the send as output, just like with the ARP sequence. Again, this was so we could add effects after it if we wanted to. Didn't really do that, if I'm honest. It went straight to the mixer rack with some processing there. This is another thing that might change, just like with the ARP sequence, but we'll come back to that. So let's hear how that sounds on its own in that clip we looked at before. So just the drums, the kick, the snare, and the hi-hats. So, going back to our MTR8 now, outputs 0, 1 and 2 were on the drum output. So that means 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 have to do something else. Now the cymbal would actually typically be part of that drum out as well, but we're just not using it this time. So we just have to ignore 7. But that means we've still got, 3's in there as well. Don't know why I'm doing that. It's 4, 5 and 6. So we've got the CB 808, the noise for the wave sound, and the RS 55, which is the rim shot. Those 3 have their own processing. So let's just take those 3 there. So there are 3 outputs from MTR8. Okay? Those 3, just like we did with other drums, get mixed together. So they run into a mixer, like that. In fact, it's the B mixer from the bog standard mixer. So the A mixer on that, the 4-channel mixer, is being used for the drums, and then the B section is being used for these. Pretty simple. These 3 sounds then run from the mixer into the delay, which is the lo-fi one. So they have a delay on them. And then from there, they run to one of the outputs via the master module. Again, this might change. We'll come on to this later. But ultimately, that's all it's doing. Those 3 sounds are mixed together into a lo-fi delay and then via the output. The noise, by the way, is basically just the noise module into a VCA. MTR8 sends the gate into an envelope generator, which triggers the VCA, and then it goes to the mixer. So that's all that's actually doing. It's pretty simple. And that's our wave sound. There. So that's what's going on output number 3. So let's hear that on its own quickly so you can kind of see what it's doing. We're going to play the middle 8 section from Echoes from the Cutting Room Floor. At this point, I don't know what section I'm using for the rest of it, but this happens in the middle 8 of that song. We hear the cowbell and the rim shot through the delay. We don't hear the noise because that's in a separate song. That's in waves. You can actually hear it though in waves on the full rehearsal set video I did, which is another video. I'll probably have that linked in the description. You'll be able to hear it there. But for these two sounds, we'll isolate them so you can hear them in this next clip. So, now that we've looked at the individual layers, what's changing? Well, not a whole bunch. At least not until after Cable Festival. I'm really happy with how this is sounding, if I'm totally honest with you. It's come together quite well. I like the sounds I'm getting from it. My only real issue is that I've used these Stomp IOs with the intention of putting it through effects pedals and then to front of the house via the usual setup, DBX and the live track. I've not actually used any pedals this time. The only one that does have a pedal is the arpeggiator sequence. But even then, it's a tuner. It goes into a tuner so that I can tune up, make sure the oscillator's bang on before I start my set. Which, by the way, the MCO never drifts. Unless I nudge something while I'm setting up, it is always dead on stable. Highly recommend it. And I think all the MD modules actually be pretty much the same way because it's digital. It's great. Embrace the digital aspect. It's really good for live use. But with that in mind, if I took away the Stomp IOs, for example, I could put in a 4 IO, which would give me 4 outputs. I could then not use the master module to output the percussion sounds. I could put that on a 4 IO output, the drum kit on one, the arpeggiator sequence on one, and I could actually, something I've been talking about for a while, I could actually split the hi-hats to their own output. So I could have the hi-hats and cymbals on one output, the kick and snare on another, the percussion and the wave sound on another one, and then the arpeggiator on its own one. I could actually have dedicated outputs. That would be better. And I have another noise gate compressor available because it's 2 per rack with the DBX. So I've got one sitting spare. I could actually run the hi-hat on its own channel, and well, the hi-hat and cymbals, and it would clean things up even more. It'd be a cleaner gating, which is always better, but then I could have a dedicated compressor and channel to dial in my hi-hats, a dedicated EQ. The more I'm speaking about this, I'm thinking I'm going to go and change that. And I think that's probably something that will change before Cable Festival. If not before, definitely after. Because I'm not tearing this rack down. The plan is to have a separate rack, that one I showed you earlier, for in the studio, and to keep this one as the live one. I don't like tearing my rigs down between gigs because, well, one, you then stop rehearsing for future gigs. You want to be staying on top of rehearsals even if you don't have a gig in the calendar. And also, it means when a gig does come up, you don't have to mad panic assemble a rig. It's already there. So I think that's what's going to happen here. That rig is going to stay as the live one, that festival one. So if I need to throw a rig together quickly, or if I need to just play a gig kind of off the cuff, this is the one that's already built. I can go and play the existing songs with that. Anything new I'm writing though, I'll probably do with this other one I'm building. But anyway, I hope that's helped. I hope you enjoyed the clips, and I hope the demo has been useful. If you've got any questions about how I've patched this, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to chat about this stuff. If there's any other AE Modular related videos you'd like to see, please let me know. I'm actually wanting to make more AE Modular content. I'm not going to stop making bass stuff, but it's going to be a combination of the two. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to support what I do, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon and the notifications and all that stuff that everyone asks for. I do have my music on here, linked below. I do also have it on Bandcamp under Gavin Forbes Music. If you want to see updates on future gigs, new music I'm working on, then go to Instagram and you'll find everything under Gavin Forbes Music there as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and until next time, keep working on those bass faces.